One of the most famous of Buddhist stories is a warning of the dangers of obsessing over other people's actions. The story says that one day a senior monk and a junior monk were traveling together. At one point they came to a river with a very strong current, and as the monks were preparing to cross the river, they saw a young, beautiful woman also attempting to cross. The young woman asked if they could help her cross to the other side. The two monks glanced at each other, not sure immediately what to do because they had taken vows not to touch women. Then, without a word, the older monk picked up the woman, carried her across the river, and placed her gently on the other side. The two monks continued on their journey for quite a while. The younger monk couldn't believe what had just happened. He was speechless, and an hour passed without words. 2 more hours, then a third. Finally, the younger monk couldn't contain himself any longer. He blurted out, "As monks, we are not permitted to touch the woman. How could you carry that woman on your shoulders?" The older monk looked at him and replied, "Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" As much as I would like to claim any credit for this story, it is everywhere. It's a hugely popular story in Buddhism and around the world because, well, we all get stuck on other people's problems. There's a whole industry of it now in reality television. Rather than spend our time living our lives or our day, it's so much more satisfying to sit and watch complete strangers who have been edited by a production team to appear as their absolute worst selves. So we can judge them. And yes, I'm doing it now, judging others. You, all of you, should not be watching reality television because it rots your conscience. The temptation to judge others, to worry about others, is so powerful. But as the senior monk said, "Brother, I set her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This week, I want to invite us as much as possible to start with ourselves. Starting with ourselves is also a pragmatic approach to creating the change we want to see in the world. In her book, Under the Sky We Make, Kimberly Nichols, the author, makes a pretty powerful argument about the approach of starting with ourselves when it comes to climate crisis. And the scale of that problem, like so many others, can seem totally overwhelming. But we are not completely powerless. We make probably 20 choices a day that have an impact on the environment, maybe more. It's helpful to remember that we do have some power, and it's helpful to exercise the power that we do have. In addition to the direct impact of those choices, we have some social power. By choosing greener options, we normalize them. Grocery stores stock the things that people buy. Car manufacturers build the cars that people want to buy. Putting solar panels on your roof is a signal to your neighbors that there's a better option. Same goes for landscaping and irrigation. Our choices have wider social impact, and we can normalize a different way of being. Unfortunately, we can't make enough impact just by tending to our own carbon footprint. Major government regulations will be necessary. We can't change the world by ourselves. But if we start with what we can control, we can find some hope and energy to push for the bigger changes that are necessary. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't name the key steps that this author names. I had mentioned it before, and man, y'all were not happy, but I'm going to say it again. She says there are three things: stop eating meat, get rid of your car, and stop flying. They are big asks, and honestly today I am saying this as much as for myself as I am for you. But these three are important because they're the biggest impact. They're exponentially more impactful than recycling or the other, I don't want to say small, but the other things that you might do. Stop eating meat, get rid of your car, stop flying. And before the quick no, consider what we can do. Which of these are easiest? Some of you have already done some of these. What would progress look like? Maybe cutting out red meat. Share a car in your household, or maybe start saving so you can buy an electric car when the time comes. Direct flights are much better than hopping around environmentally. Or maybe just fly when you really have to. It is so much more satisfying to point the finger and tell others what to do, isn't it? I never said that starting with ourselves was easy, but starting with self is absolutely the way to make the change in the world that we want to see. Of course, this isn't just about environmental issues. For a very long time, justice movements have worked to embody the change that they want to see. Several years ago, we saw the Occupy Wall Street movement demonstrating whole new styles of decentralized leadership. It was fascinating. And we know Gandhi and King embraced nonviolence not just as a goal, but a way to get to that goal. Today, if you're plugged into our wider Unitarian Universalist movement, you'll see how hard folks are working to bring us into being an anti-racist, anti-oppressive institution so that we can build that into our world. As cliche as it sounds, there is a lot to be said for the concept of being the change you want to see. Obviously, it's not that simple, but it's a very, very good place to start. In casual discussions of Buddhism, I'm sure we hear a lot about compassion. And as necessary as compassion is, without some balance, it can be overwhelming. There is a seemingly endless supply of suffering in the world. I was going to list some of those examples, but you all hear the news or read the paper. It's really not necessary. And unless you're a complete hermit, there are people around you, family, friends, folks here at Tapestry, that you worry about, their pains and their challenges. For the people we know, for the countless people we don't know, we open our hearts in compassion. Deep compassion, by itself, though, can be unsustainable. There's another state of mind that is held in just as high esteem in the Buddhist tradition. We don't hear as much about it. It's equanimity. Maybe we don't hear as much about it because it's harder to describe and it's a lot harder to achieve. One way of understanding equanimity is the ability to stay centered while engaging in compassion. Equanimity, as it sounds, is a state of mind and heart that stays balanced. It's not checking out or avoiding reality. In equanimity, as events unfold, we're able to experience them fully and know that they will pass. That's one key to maintaining balance, remembering that all things are temporary. Our joy, our suffering, another person's joy or suffering will pass. It's all temporary. That does not mean that it's not important. It just means that it's not everything. Equanimity also takes into account the responsibility and power that we each have to cultivate our own happiness. In Buddhism, there's this helpful distinction between pain and suffering. I know we use them as synonyms, but they kind of separate them out in an interesting way. The metaphor that's often used to describe the difference is about being shot with an arrow. When we're shot with an arrow, there's an initial physical pain. Ouch. The pain is unavoidable. In real life, that might look something like an illness or an accident or even a harsh insult from another person. There are all sorts of arrows and pains that we can't avoid. The challenge is that when pain occurs, we have a tendency to add a layer of suffering on top of it. We ask, who shot that arrow? And why? Did I deserve to be shot? Are more arrows coming? How can I shoot an arrow back? And this heap of questions and feelings that we add, our response to pain can be called suffering. Pain comes as the initial injury or insult. It's immediate and unavoidable. Suffering occurs in the way we respond to that pain, in our grasping onto it. In equanimity, we come to understand that our happiness and suffering are not completely caused by our experiences and circumstances, but in our responses to them. I want to repeat that because it is a hard pill to swallow. Our happiness or suffering are not caused by our experiences or circumstances. Happiness or suffering arise as a result of how we respond to them. In life, a certain amount of pain is unavoidable, and life is unfair, man. Some of us get through relatively easily, while others have mountains of pain heaped upon them. It's not a choice. We can make some choices to avoid it, and we can try to help other people get the pain out of their way. What is a choice is how we respond to that pain. It's a choice that we make, and it's a choice that the people that we love make. And it is their choice. In meditation, we often use phrases that we repeat to ourselves. Over time, they settle in and become a little more real. So I want to offer you some of the phrases that we might use to focus on equanimity. This is very quick, but we will do a mini meditation if you're comfortable with that. Sit back, relax, close your eyes for just a moment. Take a deep breath and let these phrases settle in as you repeat them to yourself. I am responsible for the consequences of my actions. I am responsible for the energy and attention I give my thoughts and feelings. May I find a true source of happiness and be at peace where I am. And now, if you will, imagine an adult person that you care deeply about, or perhaps someone you find frustrating, and picture them clearly in your mind. And let these phrases settle in. Regardless of my wishes for you, your happiness is not in my hands. You are responsible for the consequences of your actions. You are responsible for the energy and attention you give your thoughts and feelings. May you find a true source of happiness and be at peace exactly where you are. Namaste. Thank you for exploring a very quick meditation. Some of those ideas may be challenging. I cannot stress enough that equanimity comes as a complement to compassion. It's not a cold disinterest. Quite the opposite. Equanimity is holding deep compassion for others and simultaneously knowing that their happiness and suffering ultimately is not in our hands. One final note that I want to leave you with about starting with self is that this applies to the good stuff too. Love, patience, gentleness, encouragement, presence, kindness, wisdom. It is possible to offer these essential things to ourselves. More than possible, it's absolutely life-giving to offer these things to ourselves. We offer these things to ourselves not so that we can be self-sufficient, which is a kooky idea. We offer love, patience, gentleness, encouragement, presence, kindness, and wisdom to ourselves as a reminder that we have the capacity to offer these things to our neighbors and to our friends and to our family. We don't end with ourselves, but we're certainly called to start there. Writing this sermon had me second-guessing myself more than usual, if I'm honest. Is that really what I want to say? That sounds really harsh. How is this going to sit with people? It turns out it's not an easy message. It's so much more appealing to blame others for our experiences or to pretend that we have the power to make other people behave or feel the way we want them to behave or feel. To be sure, there is a lot we can do to make our world a better place, and 99% of worship services you will hear in Unitarian Universalist congregations are just about that. This week, I guess the challenge I call us to is a little harder and closer to home. While we open our hearts with compassion, let us remember that finding happiness is a very personal journey that each person is called to make on their own terms. While we aim to make a difference in the world that's so badly in need, let us remember that starting right where we are every day is the only way to get to where we want to go. Amen.